All right. So I'll continue a little bit about kind of what my grandpa taught me and kind of what's going on in college. So I remember at the beginning of college, I went to visit my grandpa in Kauai, right? And at that time, my uncle was there, and my and I was gonna titrate off of Prozac because that's what I was taking in high school. Because my parents, like I said, what happened was I'm picking up off the shooting machine. My dad's beating me up because he's like, Ryan, you're shooting square. But I didn't know it was a shooting machine that was a problem. And like I said, there was never, if people want to be like, oh, well, Ryan must have been a problem child. And I was never once abused my whole life. Only once the shoot away machine. And only because it made me shoot wrong and my dad got upset. So I was a victim. And so there wasn't anything wrong with me. People are going to be like, oh, you must have problems and you must have always had problems with your family. No, I'm telling you it was a shoot away machine. And that's why it's so stupid. And it's so stupid what they're doing. And the fact of the matter is, what's the most stupid thing is that I discovered the theory of everything, and then and it turned that into abuse. That should have been something that was celebrated. It should have been something that was positive, but they turned that into something very negative. So, but just to continue, so I went to Kauai. I got the pills, and my grandpa and my uncle were taking apart the pills and making them half full of Prozac so I could titrate off of it. And my uncle was like, dude, your parents are the dumbest. He said, your parents are the stupidest. He said, what kind of bullshit is this that they put you on this shit? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. They are kind of stupid. But my uncle hates my dad, so I'll get to that. Because my uncle told me that my dad used to beat him up. And my dad's a piece of shit. And my uncle hates my mom more than anybody. My uncle said that my mom's a bitch. And then, like I said, my grandma hates my mom. My grandma and my grandpa. And my grandma was like, he said my mom's a name caller. And apparently my uncle needed help with money at one point. And he went to my family, and my mom asked him if he was gay and did a lot of stuff to him that just really pissed him off. And because my mom's she might be a sociopath. Because, my mom didn't like Amos, so she was trying to, hurt him. Through saying mean shit. And so I don't know. Maybe my family's, all I know is my mom and dad have issues, dude. They're kind of fucked up. But like I said, though, I don't want to diagnose them because like I said, my whole life, everything was great until the shoot away machine. That's why I say it was a shoot away machine. But, what kind of person does the shit that my mom did to me? Even if it was a shoot away machine, she has to have some sort of sociopathic lack of empathy tendencies or some sort of mental issues. But anyway, so I was in Kauai, and like I said, when I talked to that psychologist or the psychologists who were helping me out, they told me that I didn't need medicine. They said I didn't have any mental disorder. They gave me the MMPI, all that stuff. But then they told me, because they talked to my mom, they said your mom has a personality disorder. They said your mom needs medicine. She's fucked up. So. But anyways, and what they diagnosed me is they said, you don't have any mental illness, you have family issues. What it boils down to is I have an evil, stupid bitch mom. That's what it boils down to. An evil, it's not a crazy diagnosis. It's evil, stupid bitch mom. So, I was in Kauai, and my grandpa, but at one point, I don't remember exactly if this was the first time I went to Kauai in college or the second time, so that gets all mixed up. But I remember my grandpa had an Ayn Rand book. He got it from the library, and he's reading Ayn Rand. And my grandpa was a big fan of Ayn Rand. And again, I'm looking at this, and I'm like, I always knew it. My grandpa's a white supremacist. That's the way I saw it, because Ayn Rand is against Marxism. And I always saw Marx being against Marxism as kind of being anti-Jewish, because the Jews are always associated with Marxism. Even though, apparently Ayn Rand is Jewish, Jews are always associated with Marxism. And that's what the white supremacists are always go on about. They're like, yeah, the Jews are Marxists. They want race mixing. They want, they want to encourage race mixing and, basically encourage the white man to get rid of his wealth to share with the people of color, and basically the overthrow of the white man, right? And my grandpa was a big time Ayn Rand fan. And, because my grandpa's whole thing is, yeah, all that matters is just work hard and go all out. And, that's it. Just work hard, go all out. Don't look back. Just keep working hard and work hard. And I was always like, dude, that whole work hard bullshit, obviously, I'm not going to try to say like working hard is not important, but I'm like, yeah, but there's a lot of other shit that's important too. Like number one, having a family that's supportive and backs you up. And that's what I had when I was growing up. And that helps a ton. Because if you don't, it fucks up your mind. It fucks up a lot of stuff. So my grandpa would be like, well, transcend, you know, later he'd be like, transcend all attachments to the family. And, you know, because, you know, if you're in the flow, you transcend all attachments to everything. And there is no family when you're in the flow. But then he would later admit to me like, yeah, but it is true when you have a supportive family and stuff, that gives you a stable, supportive structure that you can lift off on so you can transcend yourself to the flow. And it can be difficult if you have an immature and lower level software mom and shit. Like my grandpa make things so fucking complicated, but it's like, but my grandpa, you know, but anyways, he's reading the Ayn Rand book. And it's like, but his whole thing is like, yeah, you know, and he also was kind of, now this is an interesting thing I'm going to get to. So I'll get to this later, but my mom, you know, was influenced by my grandpa. My mom would be like, yeah, you know, you shouldn't give to the poor. They should get a job. I'm a stupid bitch. But I remember I told my grandpa that one time. This was a lot later. This was after all the abuse that happened and after my mom tried to get me in the psych wards and shit. And I told my grandpa, I was like, Grandpa, you know, you fucked up my mom because she thinks that she follows your teachings, but she doesn't. And she's just and she become a right-wing bitch. Like very right-wing, very like sadistic, psychopathic bitch. She's an evil psychopathic bitch. But my grandpa was like, Ryan, I did not teach her that. And I told him, because I was like, well, you know, because my grandpa would be like, yeah, you know, if you give to the poor, then you enable them to not get a job. And getting jobs is so important because when you get a job, then that, you know, and you're working, when you're not necessarily work, my grandpa was saying, not necessarily work, but just being a part of creative projects that takes you outside of yourself. And that helps you to transcend the self and strengthen the self and develop competency so you can strengthen the self so you can transcend the self. So like, I understand all that. But my mom would be like, oh yeah, no, never give to poor people because it enables them so they don't get a job. So I told my grandpa that and how she misinterpreted his teachings. And he was like, yes. He said, well, I told him that. And I was like, she got those teachings from you. And he was like, no, Ryan, that she misinterpreted. I cast pearls to swine. And I'm like, okay, so what are you talking about? And he was like, well, you know, she has she expresses, he wouldn't say she has because that would be self-confirmatory and personalizing. But he said she is expressing, she doesn't have it. She is expressing lower level of software, judgmental, attitudinal, which is self-confirmatory. So I understand what my grandpa's saying. He's saying that my mom, he would say it's true. Sometimes giving to the poor could enable them. And my grandpa would say, it never helps giving to the poor. He says it helps the person who gives. It doesn't help the poor necessarily. It helps the person who gives. But my grandpa, becomes complex because maybe it could actually help the poor. And that's a part of being in the flow. But this is what my grandpa would later teach me, but I didn't understand at this time. He taught me about Paul. And he would say, Paul says, the good I would, I do not, that which I would not, I end up doing. And the idea is, because he's using rationalistic thinking and he's trying to make things happen, but he's not in the flow. So, for instance, he gives to the poor thinking he's helping the poor. But then the poor go and they buy drugs and they die, right? Or they end up using that to buy guns and they kill their rival gang, right? So you think you're helping, but you're actually not helping. And that's the idea my grandpa would be saying is, he would say it never helps to give to the poor. What helps is it helps you because you let go of attachments. And you see, at this time, he never taught me this stuff because he was a bad teacher. So he just confused me. But now I understand because I read Dr. Horace's books and stuff. Okay, the idea behind getting rid of attachments is if you're in the flow and you're attached to anything, then you're not open to the expectancy of the unexpected, of the insight, of the truth, of the what is perfect, because you're too attached. So if you're in the flow, you let go of all attachments. So, but anyways, so I'm watching my grandpa. But anyways, my grandpa would say, yeah, your mom expresses dualistic software. Dualistic means that see again, I didn't understand what dualistic was, but now I understand. But at that time, I'm just confused. He said expresses dualistic software, and she and she's judgmental. She's like, yeah, the poor should just get a job, and she thinks she's superior, and she's looking down on them, and that's self-confirmatory, and it's narrowing of her consciousness. But my grandpa, so and it's interesting because I listened to a rabbi talk about this. And he was saying like, yeah, it would be better to not give to the poor, but at the same time be like, tell the poor person, hey, I hope things go good for you. I'm on your side, and if it's authentic, like I'm on your side, you know, I want to help you out, but I don't have any money, but I want to help you out. I'm on your side. He said that would be better than give to the poor and be like, yeah, you stupid bum, get a job and acting all negative and stuff. But that's what my mom doesn't get. My mom, again, she misinterpreted my grandpa's right-wing teachings, and she thinks, oh yeah, it's cute to be a callous, mean, right-wing bitch. Yeah, oh my God, I'm a stupid bitch. And that's the way my mom is. It's sad. It's sad that someone can turn into such a fucking callous whore, bitch. But that's what my mom became. So I'll get to that. And I'm sorry that I got so angry there. And I think that, again, that's my PTSD, because that's my HPA axis is out of whack. I think about the evil stuff my mom has done, and it just gets me so angry. But that's something I have to work on. But so basically, but I see my grandpa when I'm in Kauai. I see him reading these Ayn Rand books, and he's all into Ayn Rand. He's talking about working hard and synergy. The world is synergy, and everything's synergy. And because my grandpa followed Buckminster Fuller, who's a white guy, like a German guy, and the idea that he gave was life is an anti-entropic eroding function against the entropy of the universe. So the idea is you want to work hard and be a part of creative projects and be a part of synergy, and that's going to be in counterbalance to the entropy of the universe. So again, but I would listen to my grandpa and I'd be like, but you know, at that time he didn't really teach me that. Again, he was a bad teacher. So he'd kind of teach me, but I'll get to this, but I'll get to the idea of devil and double too. So I'll talk about that. But so he confused me, but at the same time, like my impression of him was, when I was ever around him, my impression was, my grandpa's German. He's a white supremacist. He's a Nazi. That was my impression every time. I would just be like, this guy's a Nazi. He's a white supremacist. He's basically a right winger. It's like, yeah, work hard on the bars, work hard and go all out, work hard. And in my mind, I'm like, it's not that big of a deal to work hard, dude. I'm like, yeah, working hard is good, but it's like at the same time, like again, like there's a lot of other factors, and working hard is cool, but it's like, but another thing, like I said, I would think about the shoot away machine. And I felt like my dad got the shooting machine because he's like, shoot 500 shots a day, work hard, yeah. But that ended up backfiring. But again, my grandpa would be like, yeah, well, that's because he wasn't in the flow. If you're in the flow, he wouldn't have done that. So he wasn't working hard. He was making things happen. And again, like, and that would be my grandpa would be like, if you're in the flow, you could discern if this homeless guy could benefit from the money you give to him. But you have to be in the flow. And my grandpa would say there is no formula to get in the flow. But one way you can get in the flow is through practicing rituals of your religion, which takes you outside of yourself. But regardless, my grandpa's teachings are complex. So he's teaching me this stuff, but I remember my impression always in the back of my mind was like, my grandpa's a Nazi. He's just a white supremacist Nazi. And so he was like Ayn Rand fan, and in my mind, I was always like, I'm kind of a Marxist. Like I always was kind of a Marxist. I wanted welfare, and to be honest, I was anti-white my whole life because I saw myself as Jewish, and I was kind of wanted race mixing. So I'll get to that. But and I did feel like my grandpa, like I feel like also because my grandpa and dad were German, I kind of had a hatred toward white people. Maybe it was even more entrenched because of my grandpa and my dad abusing me, and the bullshit that I felt like they did to me, and it made me hate white people even more. But then later, like I said, I would start to recognize that white people had more swag flow, and I started to feel bad for being anti-white, and I kind of just like did a U-turn. But I'll get to that. So, but like I go to Kauai, and then I remember one time I asked my grandpa when I was in Kauai, I was like, hey grandpa, what do you think of the Illuminati? And I was testing him because in my mind, I always felt like the people who believed in the Illuminati were white supremacists. And my grandpa was like, yeah, I think there's probably Illuminati. And I was like, yep, my grandpa's one of those guys. He's one of those right-winger white guys. And I always got that impression. He's a right-winger white supremacist. So he was like, yeah, I believe in Illuminati. And he told me about how Obama was like, there was a period at the beginning of his presidency where he was taken away and no one knew where he was. And he thought it might have had something to do with Illuminati. And I was listening to my grandpa, and I was like, yeah, I didn't say it, but in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you're a white supremacist. Because my impression always was that people who believe in Illuminati were just anti-Jewish, and it was just white people who didn't want to accept that white people were evil, and white people did all the bad shit, and they wanted to say the Jews were actually the evil ones. And that was always my impression of Illuminati. And then later, like in the 2020s, I asked my grandpa again about the Illuminati. My grandpa was like, yeah, I do believe the Illuminati is mainly Jewish people who or people who claim to be Jewish. And again, I'm like, yeah, you're just a typical white supremacist Nazi. So I'm with my grandpa, and he's saying this, and he's studying Ayn Rand, which I always felt it tended to be white supremacists who are anti-leftist, who are Ayn Rand fans, right? They tend to be more right-wingers. So I was always like, yeah, my grandpa. And my grandpa even at one point said the N-word, I remember. And he said we would say like there was a boat of black people called it was like a black people cruise. My grandpa said something like, yeah, the N-word cruise or something like that. So like little stuff like that. But my grandpa didn't know that I was a Marxist. And I always thought myself as Jewish, and I was like a Marxist. So but I kept it to myself. So my grandpa would teach me too, he would teach me devil means double. So my grandpa would say the devil is dualistic software. But in my mind, I was like, yeah, I like that teaching, because I'm like, yeah, we should all race mix. We should be against dualism. We should all race mix. But I didn't understand what my grandpa was teaching, and it was only much later. So he would teach me this stuff, but he wouldn't teach me in depth, so he just confused me, because he's a dumbass. So he teach me, and I don't want to say he's a dumbass, because at the same time, he taught me a lot. But when I look at it, I'm like, dude, you taught me so much to make me confused, and you're a bad teacher. And I feel like he turned my parents into assholes. He turned everybody into assholes because he's a bad teacher. So my grandpa's telling me about the devil means double, and it's dualistic software. And I like that idea because, remember, I didn't like religion because I thought religion was white supremacist. So I thought the idea that the devil is just some sort of amorphous metaphorical concept, I thought that was beneficial. And I like the idea of because I was like, yeah, transcend dualistic software. Yeah, transcend dualism. Let's all just race mix. Transcend dualism. Let's get rid of borders. I like that idea, because I was always saw myself as Jewish, and I was anti-white. But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, that's love. That's really what the Bible's. That's really what Jesus probably taught, is just open borders. But my grandpa wouldn't say that. But because now I know that transcending dualistic software, that I was still in dualistic software, because my grandpa would say I had a predator-prey orientation toward white people. It was still self-confirmatory. I still believed that I was a separate self, and that I was a separate self, and there were separate others, as opposed to being in the flow when I recognize everything as one, and I can see things as they truly are, and I can recognize the most optimal, most perfect way, right? But I was still stuck in the self. But I saw myself as Jewish, so I had not transcended self to where I could see the other perspective. And so but I was thinking, no, I transcended dualistic software. I want race mixing. I want open borders. But that's not necessarily transcending the dualistic software. So these are types of things my grandpa's teaching me. But at the same time, I would be thinking to myself, he kind of confused me. I'd be like, transcend dualistic software. That doesn't seem like right wing. But there would be things that he'd be doing that made me think this guy's just a right wing white supremacist. And like I said, I always kind of had a resentment and an anger toward him about how he handled the situation with my family. And I felt like he was the one who kind of made my mom and dad into such assholes. His whole you can't make things happen. You just have to accept them. Everything is just fine. You can't get change people. You can't get your way. And I always felt like that was that right wing anti-Marxist type of thing. Just accept it. And that's the perfect way that religious people maintain their oppression and their victimization of people. And like I said, my grandpa would teach that there is no innocent victims. And one thing he taught was he said, sometimes you get so caught up fighting the alligators, you forget to drain the swamp. And that's another kind of right-wing thing I felt like, because that's what President Trump talks about, draining the swamp. But my grandpa would give these teachings, and again, and also his whole thing about take responsibility, because he'd say you can't change people. All you can do is take responsibility for yourself and upgrading your software. Just take responsibility, because you can't change others. But again, that's anti-Marxist to me, because I'm like, okay, first off, take responsibility, that's victim blaming. Because you take responsibility for everything, that's victim blaming. So you say, oh, well, that person's getting beat up. Well, that's because, he should take responsibility. But my grandpa would later teach me well, that would be dualistic software for you to think that. That would be predator-prey software for you to think that. And you hadn't transcended. So it gets complex. But again, I always felt like there was a right-wing hint to all this stuff, and a white supremacist hint to all this stuff. So I'll get to that more later.